Hi, my name is Ben West. I'm excited about today's episode of Magic in the Room. Before we get started, I want to let you know about a learning opportunity available to everyone. Here at Purpose and Performance Group, we talk about purpose a lot. We want people to have a deep understanding of their purpose so they can live life intentionally. We have developed a self-paced online course called Ignite Your Purpose, which will help you discover your personal purpose. This course is available to anyone and can be found at purposeandperformancegroup.com/online-learning or find a link in the show notes. Now, enjoy today's episode of Magic in the Room.
Magic is found in every room where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I am Chris Province.
And I'm Hannah Bratterud.
And I am Luke Freeman. And today, man, I'm a little intimidated to have this conversation, actually, because we are talking about a pretty amazing piece of work that Chris has completed. If you haven't listened to the episode before this around being your best and the 6 discoveries of performance, that you should do that. You should go listen to that because today, Hannah and I are going to share some of our takeaways. I certainly have some questions for Chris after that episode, but mostly I'm just sitting here with kind of this feeling of just like gratitude to be able to, that Chris, you've shared these learnings that you've discovered and you have invited us and others kind of into your journey that, is really personal. And so thank you for doing that work.
Oh man, it's been awesome. Thank you for giving it some time and consideration. For me, it's a sense-making process. Mm-hmm. Like you experience life in bits and bytes and this event and that event. And, this is all pretty therapeutic for me to think about things holistically and what am I ultimately taking away and what am I learning along the way, to be able to gather those things and share them out, man. It's so rich.
Well, I thought it was just really powerful how, you shared your origin story, right? How did Chris Province begin? And, Luke and I have had privilege of knowing you and doing life with you for well over a decade and just seeing the kind of leader you are today, the kind of person you are today, and then when you hear the story of how your life really started and the upbringing that you had, I think there's a lot of people could go in 2 different paths, right? There's that saying of, well, with these parents and this kind of upbringing, how could I do anything different? And that could mean either I went down that same path or I chose a different path. And so I think what I'm excited about today is talking about how can you choose a path that's intentional and become your best? And you always say this, Brene Brown has said it, a number of people have said it, but becoming is better than being. So we're always becoming. And if we can be intentional about becoming a better version of ourselves that's better today than we were yesterday, to me, that's success, right? For an individual, for a leader, for an organization.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question about that. So that becoming is better than being statement was definitely a theme and I think is an underlying assumption of these discoveries. And so I'm kind of curious, Chris, like your journey of, or was it a journey? Have you always thought becoming is better than being? And like, what were some of the pieces, if not, that kind of allowed you to really embrace that belief?
Yeah, I think, and I spoke to this as like, what is that hunger? Where is that born? Mm-hmm. I think in our lives, we know what feels right. In God we trust, everyone else bring data. But there's something inside of us. We know when something is right. Mm-hmm. And we know when better is possible. We know it. Mm-hmm. And it's undeniable. And there was this really, that hunger is for better.
Yeah.
Like I knew what I was experiencing, and I knew I was hungry for better, even though I didn't know what it looked like.
Right.
Because that hadn't emerged. So what are the efforts towards better?
Yeah.
And, where I'm fortunate is I am wired for like high obligation. So I think that helped in saying like, if I want something to be better, my obligation is to this. So the people that I admired would say, to this extent, make sure and get your education. Like, what the hell does that mean? Well, I have to internalize that. Well, I was fortunate enough. I'm wired for obligation. So that meant to me, like, do good in school. Do what the teacher asked. Be a good friend to your roommates or your classmates. So that's the fortunate part, is that genetic predisposition for loyalty and obligation and to do the things I'm asked to do. Okay. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm a free thinker, I do what I want. No. If a doctor says I need to get treated this way to cure something, I do it. If somebody that's really smart says I need to get an education, I do it. Like, who am I to say otherwise? So I view the people that I respected, and I followed their advice.
Yeah. So, another thing that stuck with me, and I'm going to kind of, jump to the end here, was this feeling of gratitude that I think you really laid out. It's like, hey, based on this journey, based on these learnings, like when I reflect, I feel gratitude. And for me, the opposite of gratitude is entitlement. And I think a lot of folks who listen to your story could, probably really easily say, well, a lot of folks who start where you started end up in a space of entitlement and feeling like the world owes me something, right? So tell me about that journey to land at gratitude versus entitlement. And, has that kind of always been a piece of the journey, or is that more of a destination that you've landed at?
Yeah, it's that's a challenge. I'm going to address that two ways. One, I've always tried to be the dumbest one in every group, and then be feel very fortunate that those people would allow me to be in their circle. Right. So I think about, Doug, my friend from grade school that we were in college together, and Doug's ridiculously sharp, right? Like scores a 36 on his ACT and salutatorian at a 6A school and the whole nine. And I'm like, man, like this is a guy that I can learn from. I want to see his habits. I want to see how he thinks. Luke, I remember the very first class we had together, we started O9 the same weekend, and like your creativity and how you approach the work that we were doing, it challenged me so much because I wanted to engineer the work, and you were applying artistry to the work. And like when we made those things come together, there was something that happened that I would not be able to do on my own. Yeah. And, Hannah's ability to bring perspective and challenge, my beliefs, and like, is this really what you believe? Because this is how I see it impacting you. And that, like, why wouldn't I want people, like, I never want to be the smartest one in the room. Right. I want to be the dumbest one in the room and ask a lot of questions. And that's why I'm grateful. But I think I did have this spot of entitlement that really was, post-college, when the world was directed at me and said, you go to college, you get the degree, you get the job, you move up in the job. And, it just, as I'm sitting on the therapist couch, like disillusioned, frustrated, sad, like all the things I'd been told were not true, that ultimately led me to like put down my flag, right? Really the birth of the Igniter mindset was, for me, was sitting on that couch, and saying like, when I'm not in service to other people, I'm not showing up as the person I know myself to be. If I'm concerned about what position I have, what's my title, what type of car do I drive, how do I get a bigger house, like those concerns are what's limiting my performance. Like, don't worry about that shit. Go help other people out. Go help them be successful. Quit worrying about yourself and see what happens. And, that's when I knew, like, seeing what happened when I stopped worrying about me and started worrying about other people. That's what opened the floodgates and like really turned the key in the system for like consistent evergreen gratitude. Mm-hmm. It was, my gratitude was conditional, up until that point. There was still a little bit of extraction happening of, how can I extract knowledge from people around me or extract knowledge from the books that I read to move me forward. But in that moment, it's deciding everything that I take in, what I take from Luke, what I take from Hannah, what I take from Doug, the people around me, every person that we engage with on a day-to-day basis. I'm taking that so I can help other people. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the move from transactional sort of gratitude to an evergreen, mindset or worldview.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I think we've talked about the Igniter mindset on this podcast, and if you're interested in understanding that better, listen back to our series of episodes on mindset. But I think that's where it all starts, right? That's where when we are becoming our best, it has everything to do with the mindset that we apply, right? Are we being more outward focused than inward focused? Do we care about other people first? And do we really have that awareness of the people around us? So, Chris, what did it take to create this delivery? And if you listen to the previous episode, you heard this, right? We talked about the story and these discoveries and how Chris Province became Chris Province, but that's like a life right there built in. So what was that process like of distilling down a life into these tenets?
I think the idea is, one, you guys have been on this journey since I started digging into some of the core tenets that are 3 iterations ago. So this is probably the 5th iteration of the same material. Mm-hmm. So giving it time to breathe, allowing it to emerge, saying, this is what I believe today. Mm-hmm. But this one piece, like, I've got some other thoughts on it. So where does that iterate to? And then one piece iterates out and you restack it, do the re-rack, say, well, now how does it come about? How does it feel together? Well, now I've got thoughts around this other thing, and we're learning some new science in these areas, or we are on this project or with this company that's highlighting some other aspects of this. So one is iteration, this being, I'm going to say it's 14 years, since we first put these kind of stakes in the ground to be able to get it to, a 30-minute delivery. The other piece is clarity of thought. Like, you have to have time to think. Yep. Those late nights after everybody's in bed, just sitting there and banging out an article on identity. Mm-hmm. That's the idea. Just doing it because it's fun and it's enjoyable. So I think you have to enjoy it. You got to have a passion for the subject matter, and you have to have space to think clearly. That's away from work. It's away from the day-to-day. It's just set aside to focus on this and things related to this that feed into it.
Yeah.
So, and just one more. I'm curious. So at this point, and we know that you just celebrated your 46th birthday, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a life in summary to this point, and we're always becoming. So when you deliver this again in, let's say, 10 years, what do you think will have changed?
I think the execution component becomes more orderly, because right now we define that as execution as the test of the entire system. Like, if you have everything stacked correctly, you can execute. Well, what is execution? It's all the things we learn and all the things we do, all the things we need to learn and all the things we need to do. That's in that bucket. And it's really broad, But I think there's some discipline, and I think the grow out from this is, how do you execute?
Right.
How do you prioritize the things you need to learn? How do you prioritize the thing that you do in order to achieve, kind of get that recognition and become more resilient? And then I think we can have the discussion, like, is it really about resilience, or is it about eating change like protein and being anti-fragile? So, I mean, are we really shooting for resilience? And I'm open to that challenge, like across this conversation, like, what is it we're truly shooting for?
Right.
An ability to get back on our feet, or an ability to become even better through change.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm really excited to talk through the 6 discoveries and reflect on those a little bit and do some takeaways for listeners. But first, it's time for our question of the day.
All right, let's get it. Hello, and welcome back for another question of the day. Except today, it's not a question, it's a statement and a directive.
Ooh.
It's another way we like to open facilitations and workshops. It's really simple. This is something that was introduced by Dr. Bob. It's just something to get some gratitude flowing, and it goes like this. Tell me something good.
It's my favorite way to open any meeting or conversation. Something good for me right now is that I got a chance finally to go and visit my family. So because of COVID restrictions, it's not been possible to travel to Norway, where I was born and raised and where my parents are and half of my siblings are. It would be possible for me to go there, but Norway still has a quarantine requirement. So even if you are fully vaccinated, but you can't verify your vaccine through the EU vaccine database, it doesn't count. So I would still have to quarantine if I went there. So I went to Sweden instead, where the other half of my siblings live, and they all went to school there and married Swedes. So I have a bunch of nieces and nephews and 3 sisters and 1 brother who live in Sweden. And then my parents came over there. So I got to see them and meet them. And it was just a really, really good, it was short, kind of a quick decision to go right at that time so we could spend some time with my parents while they were visiting as well, but just reconnecting and seeing everybody, be able to hug everybody and spend a little quality time with my people. That was awesome.
That's awesome. I'm glad you got to do that. And then you got home and we rushed you down here, and you guys fly out tomorrow and all that good stuff. So
it's a whirlwind of a month, I would have to say, because I'm moving to this month. So a lot going on, but I'm really grateful to be right here in the studio with you guys today.
It's a lot of goodness.
Yeah, that's good.
Luke, what's going on, man?
Okay, so I'm going to do a back to school one, which my boys are back in school. And it definitely comes with some mixed feelings. I think there's some risk that we're trying to figure out how we mitigate, especially with not all of them being old enough to be vaccinated. But man, just seeing them re-engage with friends has been really rewarding and really fun. Especially our oldest, he's a high schooler now. So this is his first year in 9th grade, and he already went to a party with a bunch of high schoolers, all the way up to seniors. It was for drama. So I pulled up to drop him off, and they had a movie screen set up outside in the backyard. And, I was texting him throughout the night, hey, you ready for me to come get you? And he was like, no, I think about 11 will be good. And, at 10 o'clock, I was like, hey, you ready? And he's like, I think 11's good. And just to hear him being yeah, people were cool. They were nice to me. Was really good. I mean, as a parent, you really want good for your kids, and you see all of their potential that's just laying inside them, just waiting to developmentally emerge. And every time you hit one of those kind of benchmarks where kind of that next chapter comes about, it's just really exciting and makes you really grateful. And at least for me, with 3 who all have very different personalities, you also just realize how little you have to do with their success. I mean, so much of this is what did Dr. Bob say? Most recent research is 70% of our personality is driven by our genetic profile. And
Wow.
like you just see it coming out, and you see all of this potential that's unique and different from my own potential. And so it's really exciting and fun journeys right now. And we're choosing every day to be hopeful and be grateful and keep pressing forward through these unprecedented times, to use the phrase of the millennia, I guess.
That's a good one.
How about you, Chris?
Lots of goodness. Well, I just hit 46 yesterday, which seems like a pretty, just not a very special birthday, right?
Well,
but I think it.
Happy belated birthday, Chris.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I was fishing for something like that.
Oh yeah, happy birthday.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, I appreciate that. No, I think it's, you're closer to 50 than you are to 40.
Mm-hmm.
And there's realizations that go with that. And I think overall, when I talk to the folks that I coach and a lot of times they're, working to define their earnings potential, and they're not harvesting on that yet. Right. And you start to notice the things that are valued when you're younger versus when you're, of more maturity. And, a younger leader isn't really concerned about, legacy or who I'm developing behind me. They're okay, how do I define where I want to be and what's my trajectory and how do I resource that trajectory? So, one, making it here for me is an accomplishment. 46 is a good number. So I'm grateful for every day and grateful to arrive at 46 with, 3 healthy children. And again, they're all back in school and just doing everything I can to support them. So, as I enter this phase of not just 46, but kind of that second half of life, it's taken those inventories more and more frequently, and like realizing that today is the day to do the things, because I'm a lot closer to the end than I am the beginning. So I got a lot of work to do, folks.
I mean, that depends on how long you plan to stick around.
Right. I figure 72, right? I got this times 2. Right, I'm halfway done. How about that? Or wait, that'd be 92, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be.
Oof.
Well, I'm
out before that.
I'm shooting for 100.
I'm out before the diapers get involved.
I'm shooting for 100 plus with no diapers and being able to walk and think and remember things.
Yeah, I think you'll make it, Hannah. I'm less certain about me.
Well, I hit that 46 mark just a couple months ahead of you.
Right.
So,
That's right.
I'm leading the charge
Well,
here.
here's to the next year together. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, great. We are back talking about the previous episode, Chris sharing on being your best. And now it is time for us to go through the 6 discoveries. So I'd love to just hit these one at a time and give us some time to reflect. So we've heard Chris's thinking around this. So I would love for this to be a time where we can ask questions and also, interact a little bit on it. So the first one is igniter mindset.
Yeah. So, Chris, you were talking about this transition that you had of going from being maybe self-centered, feeling entitled that, okay, I checked all the boxes, I went to college, I worked hard, and now I deserve this title or this car or this promotion, whatever. And you talked about this, shifting to an outward mindset. So how can we get more intentional about creating that outward aspect of the igniter mindset?
And this is what I don't know the answer to explicitly. So here's what I do know. When I look at the people around me, whether that's John Stewart, Jonathan Schmidt, Luke Freeman, Hannah Broderud, Tom O'Donnell, the list goes on and on and on. Ben West, like all these people have huge hearts in common, and they all live for other people. Now, I don't know, was it my mindset that shifted first and I started living that way and all these people started to show up in my life? Or was it the opposite? That I started inviting these people into my life and all of a sudden my mindset started to turn. And, that's something that this ability to extend care unconditionally, like that's what all those people have in common. Anyone that is in my circle, that's kind of the table stakes, is can you extend care unconditionally? And did my mindset shift first and then all these people show up? Or did I invite these people in and then my mind shift turn? I don't know. I just know that it wasn't something that I was naturally wired to do because of the order of things, food, safety, shelter, right? Mm-hmm. We are wired to focus on those things first.
Yeah.
And that's why when we score outward mindset, it's typically low.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because we're wired to care about us first. Mm-hmm. And there's an element of that. But the true test, and this is my question for you guys, are you wired to extend care unconditionally? Or is it something you have to be hyper intentional about, reasonably intentional about? Because that's how you both show up to me.
Yeah. So this movement from mercenary to missionary, which that's not the words you use, but I think that's a, condensed version of it.
Right.
I think it requires a letting go of security on some level. Mm-hmm. So saying that, for you to say my career and my success really depends on how much value I can bring into the lives of the people around me, not my focus on myself. Like that's an act of faith on some level that there's truth to that statement. And I think for folks who are willing to let go of fear and have faith that if we focus on others, we will be okay. I think that's the turning point. And it's not just a one-time turning point, it's an everyday turning point. To answer your question, like, what does it take to get there? Like, I think it's different for everyone, right? Everyone's fears are a little bit different. Letting go, for folks is a little bit different. What they saw modeled as the ultimate good, what is the good life, was a little bit different. So I think for folks who saw it modeled, the good life is caring for others, and maybe who are naturally a little bit more willing to take risk, like that letting go of self-protectionism and security, it might come a little easier.
So I think it's both. Because on some very basic level, we're all wired for survival and self-preservation. I mean, that's where it starts, right? And every species has this drive for self-perpetuation. And we can look at it in this sense of, okay, as humans, the way we have survived is through community. Mm-hmm. We're wired for connection and for interdependence as well. So I think when we recognize that caring for others is caring for me, then it becomes this, system that can perpetuate itself where I'm living my best life because I'm in service to others, and the people in my life are what makes my life great and even possible.
Yeah, I want to give you a helmet sticker for that one. That's good. That's real good. I'm taking that with me.
Yeah, that's good. So like what I hear you saying, Hannah, is the recognition of the collective.
Yeah.
And that our identity is a part of this collective. Mm-hmm. And that's a worldview thing, right? So changing your worldview. And I think some people would say, like a mystical spiritualist would say that, our identity as individuals is on some level an illusion. And once you're able to let go of that illusion, maybe it becomes easier to act in less self-interested ways.
Right. And I think the other piece that's way more like practical is I've already had a life where I didn't have shit. So like not having shit again should not be it should not be anything to be afraid of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like I've not had and been just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of folks that only deal in the currency of money. And it's hard to watch,
Yeah.
you know, but when we can start dealing in the currencies of care and kindness and creating balance sheets based on those things, that's a life changer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to discovery number 2, which is role clarity. And I will say this is the least intuitive of all of the discoveries for me. It's the most challenging for me personally. And, you know, as you said earlier, this is the 4th, 5th iteration of these. So, you know, we've talked about role clarity a lot, and like you've carried that banner. And it's been incredibly challenging work for me to go and take those inventories and do that reflection around like what roles do I have in life? Because I think the way I intuited it was, well, I'm kind of defined by whatever situation I'm in, and I kind of become what I need to become in whatever room I'm in, whatever team I'm working with, whatever. But whenever I kind of took the challenge, based on you modeling it and really sat down and thought through my roles, it led to this level of intentionality that was really granular to be able to say, okay, in this role, like in my role as a brother, what behaviors do I need to take that align with my values? And like, that's a very granular exercise that I would never do on my own. And so I really appreciate this discovery, and it continues to be a challenge for me. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, where you started there, Luke, is like without the clear priorities around each role, we tend to be a bit too elastic, you know, kind of bouncing from position to position or situation to situation. And that's what can lead us to struggling to find direction. And really what I've learned, and where a lot of my suffering comes from, is any time that I don't pick me and establish my own priority for the role, the priorities for that role are set for me.
Yeah.
So if I don't prescribe my priorities as a product manager, then my director will prescribe that to me. If I don't identify my priorities as a father, my children will set those priorities for me. If I don't identify my role as a husband, my spouse will identify those priorities for me. And before long, I look around and I'm not living me. I'm living someone else's priorities for me. And when I start doing that at home, at work, with my kids, with my parents, like, where is my identity? And that's where this comes into play. Yeah.
Wow. That's, that was a big aha moment for me just now, you know, and I think so many people find themselves there. That's what I think a midlife crisis very much is for a lot of people. You wake up and all of a sudden you realize, I'm not living me. I'm living somebody else's life, or I'm living priorities that others set for me. And I think that's why it gets so powerful to be intentional about this. I want to ask, you know, so the third discovery here is purpose clarity. What's the reason you have role clarity listed before purpose clarity?
Because I think roles they start framing in the mind in my worldview as what I value. And then if I survey across all of my roles, what are some common trends? When am I at my best? Like, if I know what success looks like within those roles, I know when I'm at my best, which when we're looking at developing purpose and excavating that's where we start.
Right.
You know, so as we say, this is what success looks like in these roles, in my role as X, in my role as Y, I tend to be at my best when.
Yeah.
You know, and here's what I believe, judging by what success looks like within my roles. And that plants the seed for a strong purpose excavation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I sequence them the way that I do.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
what are your guys' thoughts on it?
No, I like that, the suggestion here is that when you become clear, when you can clearly identify the roles that you play in life and you look across those and you find the common denominator that brings out the best in you or allows us to be the best version of ourselves, what are those qualities that can be a clue to discovering and identifying a clear purpose?
Yeah, I think these are all, if I was going to visualize them, interconnected upward spirals,
Right.
and there is some level of hierarchy and like you've programized this process for people, which is incredibly valuable. But I think in the real world, if we don't execute on anything, which is discovery number 5, it's very difficult to get the feedback required to clarify our purpose. If we don't practice resilience, which is kind of the pinnacle of this, it's going to be really difficult for us to take the courageous step to have an outward mindset, right? If I'm not willing to risk, then in any of these, I'm going to really face some huge psychological obstacles as I continue to try and become. So I think the logic of role clarity helping with purpose clarity makes a lot of sense. I also think sometimes there are people that a piece of their purpose is just such a ember burning within them that roles need to be defined based on that or because of that.
True.
So for me, one of my core values is like that aesthetic matters. And like, I really value beauty, and that that impacts how I show up in my roles, in that on some level, even though it's not practical, I have to say, no, I need things to be a certain way if I'm going to feel okay here. And that sounds much more dramatic, I think, than I intended it. But, if I don't understand that about the core of who I am, I'm not going to have clarity on how I show up in my roles and what boundaries I have in the roles that I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. And then, all that feeds into, if I understand my roles and I understand my purpose, like how do I action those? And it's almost like through discovery number 4, like the daily commitments, what we're doing is creating the culture of me. Like what is my culture? And, I really made this discovery because I needed something to stimulate activity. Like, how do I create that caloric heat? How do I exercise my own system? And it's by actioning these commitments and again, creating space and thought clarity to execute on an exercise. And it's an exercise we do in workshops, the Today Matters exercise. And it allows, like through daily commitments, it allows me to identify easily like what is on brand and off brand for the culture of me, right? And thinking about who I believe myself to be versus the person I show up as. Things that I do is like today I will act on my curiosity to learn and inform my personal perspective. Today, I'll do something remarkable for someone else. Today, I'll offer bold perspectives about what is possible. Today, I'll acknowledge difficult truth from a place of care and respect. Today, I want to extend grace to everyone and be a steward of their story. And today, I'm going to invest in people who willfully accept the leadership challenge. And today, I will set and keep appropriate commitments. And some of those are very like DNA, they're wired. Some of those are aspirational. Some of those are things I just need a reminder about.
Yeah.
But as I approach my day, if I can orient my activity around those things, it protects the culture of me and puts a lens on what I should be doing and what I should action.
I just really appreciate this conversation and this reminder, and I think for me, a big takeaway in that discovery is getting back to that practice of starting each day intentionally by setting a clear intention for the day and a commitment for how I want to show up. And it's something that, I I've learned to get more explicit about, even just through our conversations. And because that's another big thing that you talk about a lot are the daily commitments, and the commitments even organizationally to values, behaviors that exemplify our values. But yeah, for me, I've kind of gotten away from that practice a little bit, right? Of starting each day in this intentional way. And I think it really affects how our day ends up being and what kind of leader we are that day, how well we can serve the people we're in community with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, what I really appreciate about this daily commitments one is that it frames every day as a finite, scarce resource.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, we as human beings have a hard time grasping a lifetime intuitively.
Yeah.
And for the most part, and I'm sure this is different for folks who are older than me significantly, but for the most part, you don't really think about today is the only one of todays that I get, consciously.
Mm-hmm.
But, accepting this practice and thinking about it as a daily commitment, it acknowledges that today is a finite resource, and I only get one shot at how I deploy my energy today.
Mm-hmm.
And it can add value, or it can detract value, or it can be neutral. And the idea that the more intentional we are, the more likely we are to add value with that day, which doesn't necessarily mean activity, right?
Right.
So value does not equal activity, but the more likely we are to, be successful.
And a lot of times I frame it like, if only for today.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
If only for today, I'll do something remarkable for someone else.
Yeah.
I'll worry about tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to discovery number 5, execution. For me, and this might be a little bit different I think it's different than how you describe it, Chris, but it reminds me that I need boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Because when execution is elevated to the level of, 5 of 6 discoveries, it reminds me that I can't execute on everything. And if I find myself trying to do too much, it's probably because I've stumbled a little bit on my role or purpose clarity. And
Exactly.
I need to go back and firm those up and tighten them up enough to help me really choose what I need to be executing on. Because I only got so much in my energy bank,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs to be spent on things that align with my purpose and where I'm going.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think a big part of that too is to say no, because, to some extent, less is more, right? There's a great book that, had a big impact on me called The One Thing, right? It's like, what is the one thing that I really need to execute well on today? The one thing that's going to make everything else easier or not necessary. So being able to prioritize what we execute. That's one of my biggest struggles is I like to say yes to everything, and I like to take things on. And sometimes I say yes to a lot of things and I'm not able to execute well on each one of them. So even just having that filter of prioritization, I think is really helpful for execution.
Yeah. And absolutely, the idea is I love the idea that execution is the test of the rest of the system.
Yeah.
If the rest of the system is sound, you can execute. If it's not sound, you're going to struggle executing. But, the rest of the system should put that lens on the things, right? What am I choosing to do? What are my priorities? And avoiding competition in that priority space. But execution is also how was this discovered? Talk is cheap and bullshit runs marathons. Nothing ever gets done. But accomplishing anything without structure is impossible. So we have to embrace this idea that behavior follows structure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we're talking about high performance, you're talking about behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So putting a structure around that was important to me. Well, where does execution fall? Well, after you get your mindset right, you know what you're trying to do, you're committed to the things you want to action. Can you action them? And that's where the story of Lee Manzer comes in. The difference between average and great is this much effort.
Yeah.
It's just this much effort. What are you willing to do that the next person isn't? that will set you apart. And like, what are those 1% behaviors?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think it's clarity of thought, willingness to action. What are you passionate about? And filtering your life to those things that you want to see happen.
Yeah. So discovery number 6 is resilience. I mean, this is just threaded through all of these. It's the outcome. It's also the enabler. I keep going back to what you said earlier, and we've been talking about this the last couple of days, this idea of people who get these things right, not only are resilient, like, oh, I'm okay. They also eat change for protein, eat disruption as protein, however you said it. And like, that's inspiring, right? To be that resilient, to be that energized by things that 90% of the population would probably be really intimidated to face. Like, that's something that I want to work towards. And seeing this structure laid out as a way to get there is incredibly helpful to me.
Yeah, I think for me, a big takeaway on resilience is, how many times are you willing to start again? To me, it's not about not quitting. I quit all the time. I have little micro quits.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, no, I'm just quitting, right? I'm done.
Helmet sticker, micro quits.
But I always start again.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the key to resilience. You get knocked down and you get back up, and you quit and then you start over. And because if you keep doing that, you're not starting from scratch every time, right? So you get better, and you have the ability to take that experience of those challenges. Now, there's something to be said for really just sticking with something and working through a challenge, right? Running up a hill, getting through some barriers. But sometimes it requires like banging your head against the wall over and over, not getting anywhere, and then just stopping and walking away for a minute, or taking a break, taking a pause, even in the creative process, right? That's a really necessary step, is the walking away for a little bit, not thinking about it. And then when you come back, maybe there's been progress that already happened and you're further along than you thought. And to me, that whole process of starting, stopping is part of forward movement, and it's part of resilience.
Yeah, and I think when we execute, we achieve. Okay, if we execute effectively, we achieve, we advance our purpose, and then there's tests along the way. When a organization that I care a lot about, that does a lot of good work, says, hey, we're doing our yearly fundraising drive, and how can you help? Like, how can I help? Yeah. Like, what a great litmus test. Like, was I able to help more this year than what I did last year? Do I know what that looks like? Have I taken time to think about it? And my ability to help that organization, knowing that next year they're going to come knock on the door again. And like, do I want to say, sorry, I can't help you this year? Or do I have to go to work? Does my achievement this year and being able to help them inform the system as I know it, and drive me to want to make it better? And so this resilience to me kind of loops us back around. It gets back to the first part of the spiral. Like, resilience informs mindset.
Yep. Mindset
informs roles inform purpose, follow the commitments, execute every day, achieve more. And, that's where, this model really, it does pass the test. If you're able to action it, like, how do you get it practical for you? You have to internalize it. You got to be willing to do the work. There's a lot of things like, well, I do that. Well, have we done it to this level?
Right.
Have you got intentional enough where it materially influences your day-to-day behavior? And those are the things that we impact for teams and leaders. We have the exercises. How do you gauge or measure mindset, growth and outward? How do you develop role clarity? How do you excavate a purpose? How do you land on daily commitments? What are the things we need to learn, and what are the things we need to do to move this organization forward? How do we recognize people when we achieve? Like, that's the system. Now, how do we action the intentionality, or how do you internalize these messages and then action it within your own space? I think that's stepping up to meet the leadership challenge.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris, I know you mentioned a few times in the delivery on the previous episode that you were lucky to get exposed to a lot of these ideas and walk through kind of the developmental journey that you've been on to be able to package these up. And I'll take a contrarian view. Sure, I think luck has a little bit to do with it, but I think a lot of it's around you and who you are and your drive to grow and serve the people around you. But to folks who are listening, you have an opportunity to take luck out of it. If you you have podcast episodes, obviously, but you can connect with us. Man, this is the work of a lifetime. And our team loves to help people create the right mindset, emerge that, discern how they want to show up in their roles, clarify their purpose, get really granular about daily commitments that are going to help them execute on their purpose and their vision for their lives, and keep getting up, as Hannah said, from a place of resilience. So if you'd like to talk through any of this, we don't have to set up some sort of huge coaching engagement. Even if you want someone just to email back and forth with or text back and forth with to give you feedback, we love to do that. So reach out. We're at purposeandperformancegroup.com, or you can find us on our social channels. You can also do magicintheroom.com if that's easier to remember. And Chris, I just want to end with a thank you. I know I felt just humbled as we listened to the previous episode, and I'm full of gratitude for the work that you've done on behalf of me and everyone else who wants to, walk down this journey as kind of a trailblazer on the way ahead. So thank you.
Very welcome.
Yeah. Appreciate you, Chris, and the kind of friend that you've been over the years. And I see how you show up for the people in your life, including me. And so I think this is inspiring. And this is the work of becoming.
Right. No, thank you guys so much. And for your support. I mean, as I'm working through it, you guys were huge parts from iteration 0 until today. So we're, the last 13, 14 years, whatever it's been. Just appreciate you guys being part of the journey and giving the support and thought leadership to challenge me and land here. So I don't know, let's go live it and see how it changes.
Let's do it.
Thank you guys.
Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Bratteroo and Luke Freeman, and produced by Ben West. Theme music is by Evan Grimm. Title track Fake Love available on Apple Music. And this podcast was recorded at Storycatcher Studio with video and audio editing and production support by Brad O'Hara and Alicia Crum, with inspiration, strategy and technical support by yours truly, Neil Hughes. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and remember, previous episodes are available at magicintheroom.com.